And now we will start introducing our first speaker of today, Tendayi Viki. Tendayi and I met almost a year ago at a Strategizer bootcamp. I was personally very impressed, not only by his presentation skills and the topics that he mentioned, but just impressed by his life, by where he comes from, and what he has done so far. And we had really, really good conversations, stayed in touch so far. And I'm more than excited to have Tendayi join us today. And I'll hand over the stage to you, Tendayi. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. You go.
All right. Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you so much. And I'm hoping folks can hear me clearly and can also see my presentation. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you. This is a topic that I've become pretty passionate about. And it's a topic about the authenticity of innovators that are working inside large organizations. Because what we do nowadays is we spend a lot of time celebrating entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs have become like rock stars, right? So every innovator you meet is thinking of themselves as Elon Musk, or they're trying to be Elon Musk. They're talking about disruption and how their role inside the organization is to save the company. So what's interesting about that is that, of course, we want people to bring a lot of entrepreneurship behaviors into large organizations. But how much of that do we really want? I remember once I was working in a large organization and I was coaching an innovation team there, and they decided to be entrepreneurial, and they launched a landing page out into the world with a new value proposition that they were offering. But they didn't tell anyone inside the large organization that they were launching this landing page. So, when you launch a landing page, you have the value proposition, you have the call to action. And the call to action was that people were supposed to email the innovation team if they were interested. But once the customers saw this new offering, they didn't email the innovation team. What they did instead was they called the salesperson that they're used to seeing every day and said, listen, we hear that you've got this really great offering. When can we start to buy it? And of course, because this salesperson didn't know that the innovation team was running an experiment, this caused a lot of chaos within the organization. And so to the extent that we want our innovators to be entrepreneurial, we also want them to be authentic and have a really authentic understanding of the context in which they're working, because that's the only way that they can become really, really successful. And so, Saurabh, if you can help me with launching the poll, I'd like you to sort of look at this poll and really think about these characteristics of entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, and really think about entrepreneurs working in a startup versus intrapreneurs that are working inside large organizations, and then choose, by just sort of voting, which of the characteristics you think, or which one of those characteristics do you think is actually unique, something that's unique to intrapreneurs that an entrepreneur doesn't need to have. So if you can launch that, Saurabh, and then we can see what people are voting in terms of the poll.
Yeah, so the poll is launched. There is like a slight delay between what we see on the backstage and what happens on the front stage. So awesome. Tendayi, you and I, we're just going to wait for a few moments until people respond to that poll.
Yes. So the options there on the poll are, which other characteristics are unique to intrapreneurs, right? Entrepreneurs, is it unique for them to be innovative, strategically aligned, market aware, politically astute, intrinsically motivated, proactive, or relationship builders?
Yeah. So we're getting the first results in. Cool. We have intrinsically motivated is leading with 25%.
Awesome.
And right behind that, we have innovative with 24%. And then we have strategically aligned, market aware. And then we have, after that, relationship builders, proactive. And last but not least, politically astute.
Right. So characteristics that are supposed to be unique to intrapreneurs. That's an interesting kind of result, right? Are people still voting?
People are still voting, yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's let them vote for a little while longer, and then see what we end up with.
Yeah. So innovative is leading right now. Right behind that, strategically aligned and intrinsically motivated.
Right.
Yeah. And then market aware, and all the others have not even or slight double-digit responses.
Okay, cool. I think we can stop the poll now, and you can share the results, and then we can move on to sort of have the conversation.
Yeah, the results are shared. Everyone can see them.
Okay, cool. And so it seems to me that, being innovative is the winning choice, right? The people are thinking that being innovative is the number one thing that's unique to intrapreneurs. But if you really stop and think about it, right, maybe I should have phrased the question differently. Here we're talking about things that are unique to intrapreneurs, things that they don't share with entrepreneurs. So things that they have to be good at that entrepreneurs don't have to be good at. And so that's what we mean when we're talking about uniqueness, right? Because if you really think about it, right, these are shared behaviors that work for both entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. So innovativeness, right? Both people have to be sort of innovative. Being market aware works for both, because if you're an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur and you're not market aware, your product is actually much more likely to sort of fail and not succeed. Intrinsic motivation really matters because most of the time you're climbing uphill. So you need to be intrinsically motivated to go out there and actually do the work. And of course, that also means that you need to be proactive. But if you're an intrapreneur, there are things that are completely unique to you, things that you need to be good at because you're operating in a completely different environment to an entrepreneur, right? So you need to be strategically aware, right? You need to know the strategic direction in which your company wants to go. If you don't create strategic alignment with your leaders, it's very likely that the ideas that you're working on will not be taken to scale. I've worked with a lot of innovation labs that have loads of wonderful, great ideas, but when they actually finish working on those ideas, they can't convince their leadership to scale those ideas because those ideas are not aligned to where the leaders want the company to go. And so that's a really important thing for an intrapreneur to have. Also important for intrapreneurs is to be really good at relationships and also good at managing the politics, because you're working inside a large organization. And the thing that really hurts innovation inside large organizations are intrapreneurs that don't know how to navigate politics and don't know how to build relationships, because there is no innovation or new innovation product that can go out to market inside a large company without being touched by the various key functions that are within the organizations, from marketing, sales, branding, legal, compliance. So you need to build relationships with all those functions. And so these things are things that entrepreneurs never have to think about. But if you're an intrapreneur, you have to think about them. And so I believe that, over the last few years, we've been coaching our intrapreneurs and maybe giving them the wrong sort of signals and the wrong information. And I think the main person who can blame, number one, is Steve Jobs, because he's the one that's coined this phrase, it's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy. And what he meant was, it's better to be an entrepreneur and be entrepreneurial than to join the Navy, because the Navy is slow and it doesn't really work. But actually, even in Steve Jobs' own career, right, in the early stage of his own career, being a pirate didn't really help him that much, right? It actually hurt his career. He got fired from his own company that he started, and then he had to come back as a much more mature leader. So I actually believe that, rather than think of yourself as simply a pirate buccaneering, calling yourself a rebel, I'm going to move fast and break things, these are things that don't really work inside established companies. If you want to innovate inside established companies, it's actually better to be a pirate in the Navy rather than just a pirate, right? And people say, well, how is that even possible? Does that even make sense? Well, actually, the way to think about it and the way to sort of create alignment is to look at the history of pirates themselves, right? Because we tend to conflate these terms, pirates, right? And then on the other side, we might call buccaneers, pirates and buccaneers, right? And we kind of conflate these terms and we don't realize that, these things have distinct meanings sometimes. Another word that we can also conflate with the pirates is this word privateer. Now, for me, the distinction that really matters is the distinction between a pirate, who we don't want to be, and a privateer, who we want to be. You see, a pirate was simply a criminal, right? They roamed the high seas, looting, robbing, killing. They were unattached to any institution, unattached to any country. They were pretty much a lawless bunch of people that were just living their best life. Now, that's a way to live. If you want to do that, that's a good life, if that's something you enjoy. But it's not something you can do inside a large organization. Now, in comparison to pirates, privateers were also pirates in one sense, but they were pirates that were working for a specific country. So they were attached to a specific country, and their role was to roam the high seas, but their mission was targeted. Their goal was to loot loot and attack enemy ships, right? So Francis Drake, for example, known as Queen Elizabeth's pirate, or Queen Elizabeth's privateer, their role was to go out there and sort of raid, Spanish ships. Now, the distinction between these two is simply that the pirate is unattached and doesn't have institutional support, and if they're found, they will be made to walk the plank. Whereas a privateer, right, they'll be made to walk the plank if they're found by enemy ships, but if they come back to their main organization, their successes will be celebrated, right? And that's the distinction that you can make. So this is how you can become a pirate in the Navy. And this distinction really matters when we think about the effect of it, right? So if you're a pirate, if you're like, yeah, we're a pirate, we're going to set up our innovation lab far away from all the MBAs, right? Then leaders don't care about your work, right? But if you're a privateer and you've got some institutional connection to your organization, then leaders are fully invested in your success because they care about the things that you're working on. In terms of status, right? If you're just a pirate, your status is very low. And even if you succeed, nobody's celebrating your success, right? Whereas if you're a privateer, your status is high and your success would be widely celebrated. In terms of resources, if you're just a pirate, then your resources are inconsistent. You're constantly scraping and fighting for the right to survive inside your organization. But if you're a privateer, because you've got institutional support, your resources are consistent and likely to be increased, right? And then in terms of the projects that you're working on, if you're a pirate, you have to hide your projects from leaders, because if they discover them, they're going to be made to walk the plank. They're going to be killed, even if they're viable. And that's what happens. That's why sometimes entrepreneurs are surprised that they discovered product market fit and then the leaders killed the project, right? And that's because there was no alignment there. You're not a privateer. You were operating more like a pirate, right? Whereas if you're a privateer, if your projects are viable, they're much more likely to be taken to scale. And that's where we start to find the balance of the distinction between an entrepreneur over here and an intrapreneur who is over there, right? So these are the distinctions that we need to start to learn to make in our own heads as we do this work. And so in order to succeed now, then this is where things become really critical and become really important, right? In order to succeed as an intrapreneur, you have to be authentic. And the thing that I found frustrating, people are always blaming leaders, and the narrative around corporate innovation has been that companies are bad and entrepreneurs are good. We've always painted the company and the leadership as bad people, and the entrepreneurs as the innovators, the groundbreaking, cool people that are being hurt by this large organization. But as I've been doing the work and traveling and working inside a lot of large organizations, I suddenly realized that entrepreneurs themselves don't help themselves as well with the way that they conduct themselves. And because entrepreneurs are my tribe are innovators, that's who I'm interested in. So I do this work to help them become much more successful in the work that they're doing. So if you're an entrepreneur, my first piece of advice to you is lose the act, okay? Lose the act. And what I mean by losing the act is stop the innovation theater. We do not want you to engage in innovation theater. Hackathons, design jams, idea slams, sticky notes, football tables, bean bags, all of this paraphernalia that we tend to bring into our organizations and pretend that we're really engaged in innovation. And then one day, the leadership goes, we've been funding those guys in that room with sticky notes for the last 3 years. Has anything of value ever come out of there? And they're like, no, nothing of value has ever come out of there. And then the innovation lab gets closed. And then the innovators are like, oh, the leaders don't get it, right? It's more likely that we don't get it because we're engaged in innovation theater and we're not doing stuff that actually creates value. And so what really creates value is when we start to take our ideas, these really great inventive ideas that we're coming up with in our idea jams and hackathons, and then we connect those ideas to sustainably profitable business models. So then we care about creating customer value, right? Are these inventions or these ideas that we're coming up with going to create customer value? And then can we create value for the organization that we're working on? It is the job of the intrapreneur to solve this equation. It is not your job to hold an idea competition. It is your job to ensure that once you've had the idea competition, you take the outputs of that idea competition and you turn around and you create value for your organization. If you're an innovator and you're not creating authentic value for your organization, you're less likely to succeed in a sustainable way, because eventually somebody's going to ask the question about, why are you here? Why are you in the building? Why do you exist? And you need to be able to make the case for why you exist, right? And so if you want to create value, you then have to take those ideas that you're working on, or the hackathon outputs, the idea competition outputs, the stuff that you've put on sticky notes, and really start testing those things out in the world so you can create value. So go and find out whether there's customer need, right? Do you have desirability? Do customers really want it? Do you have the right level of feasibility? Can you create this product in a way that's that's sustainable for your organization, right? Is your idea viable? Can you generate profit, revenue, and growth for your organization? And also, is your idea adaptable? Is this something that fits the environment and is able to be scaled across many countries or many geographies? Or is it something that sort of fits the competitive landscape and allows the organization to sort of create value? This sweet spot here, this is what the authentic intrapreneur is maniacally focused on when they're working on innovation projects. They're maniacally focused on solving the problems that are around desirability, feasibility, adaptability, and feasibility, to ensure that they're creating real value within their organizations. And that is really what we want people to be thinking about. One of the challenges we have inside large organizations is that innovators don't have legitimacy. We're walking around with PowerPoint presentations trying to convince leaders to allow us to innovate, right? But actually, the best way to gain authenticity or legitimacy inside an organization is to just get an early win. Do something that shows that innovation can create value. Just get an early win. A really great story about getting early wins is one from P&G. It's a book by Haggar Rao and Robbie Sutton called Scaling Excellence. And they present there an example of Claudia Kochka, who was trying to launch design thinking practices in P&G. And instead of walking around with a PowerPoint presentation, what she decided to do was to get an early win. And she did this by taking these practices to a stale brand that was kind of sort of dying, Mr. Clean. And she applied these principles to Mr. Clean and was able to revive the brand. And once she had done that successfully and got the early win and illustrated that innovation can create value, she was then able to then scale the rest of the practice throughout the organization. And when you have an early win, scaling is easy because you create gravity towards your movement. People become attracted to the work that you're doing because they also want to get value within their organizations, rather than always just push, where we're constantly asking for permission to exist within our organizations. So that's the first thing that I would say to you as intrapreneurs, which is, lose the act and start really thinking about creating value within your organizations. The second piece of advice that I would give intrapreneurs is lose the ego. Really, really lose the ego, because the value that we were just talking about creating, you cannot create this value if you're constantly rubbing people the wrong way. So you need to lose the ego, right? You are not Elon Musk, right? Because people are walking around, disruption, we're going to save the company, the MBAs don't know what they're doing, and everybody's like acting like they're Elon Musk. Hey, maybe you joined the organization as entrepreneur in residence because you used to have a startup before, but that doesn't make you better than people that are inside the organization. And the more and more you carry yourself with that vanity that you know what you're doing, the less and less likely you are to succeed. I can always tell which entrepreneurs are going to fail, which intrapreneurs are going to fail, by the level of humility that they carry themselves inside the organizations that they work. Because one thing that we need to be sure of is that nothing happens inside the organization, inside a large organization, without other people that are not in the innovation team giving some level of approval for that thing to succeed, right? I have colleagues at TD Ameritrade that I work with that are really cool. And I remember I was in a conversation with one of them, and he was telling me that when they first started their work around innovation, they used to call their innovation team the place for homeless ideas, the home for homeless ideas. So if your ideas have been rejected by the company, come here, we'll help you make them successful. And then he said to me, Tendayi, I suddenly realized that if an idea is homeless when it comes to us, it will be homeless when it leaves, right? And so for them, it became really important to build a bridge between the innovation teams that they're kind of coaching and the core business, because they suddenly realized that even if they coach the team and the team shows really great success, that team may not be able to launch that product at scale without building relationships within the whole organization. And so it really, really matters that we focus on making sure that these things happen. And so another poll that we're going to launch for you to kind of think about, right, which really speaks to the legitimacy of innovation within our companies, is think about the innovation teams that are working in your organization right now. Just really think about those teams and the work that they're doing. And then think about their legitimacy and power within the company. How easy would it be for the leaders in your organizations to disband that team and just sort of fire them? Would it be as difficult as getting rid of a key function like finance? Or is it like almost a key function? Or would it be as easy as getting rid of external consultants, right? Just like, with external consultants, you can just easily get rid of them. And so Rob, if you can launch that poll again, because I'm really interested in people's sort of judgment or evaluation of where they think their innovation teams sit in terms of legitimacy.
Okay, the poll is launched.
So the poll is launched, so you can see that.
Yes.
When you think of innovation teams within your company, how easy would it be for leaders to disband them? Would it be as hard as a key function? Is it almost a key function? Or is it as easy as getting rid of external consultants?
And we're getting the first results in.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot like external consultants. 70%.
So that's interesting, right? Because it really speaks to our place within organizations, right? And 70% of us are like, well, getting rid of us would be as easy as getting rid of external consultants. Then you can see how, the level of difficulty or the level of challenge that we have, right? In terms of trying to collaborate with our organization. So Saurabh, maybe you can stop the poll and just confirm for me the final result. What do you have?
So it became a bit better. Right now it's 61% external consultants, and then 26 and 13 and only 13% for as a key function.
Right. So you can see that, in a lot of companies, innovation is not viewed as a key function. It is a sideshow, right? It's almost like, go play over there with your friends, the stuff we say to our kids, go, little kids, go play over there. Here, the adults are running the real business. And so we really need to sort of change and transform some of that, because what we really need to understand when we're working inside organizations, and I've been running this poll myself for a while now, and I get the same results, right? I get this combination of like over 60% of people viewing themselves, as external consultants within their organizations. And so we really need to really think that, and really understand that there's no innovation coming out of a large company that ever succeeds without the involvement of other key functions within the organization. So you would need marketing, you might need HR, you might need legal and compliance, you might need finance, right? And then you're the innovator, but you can't take this product out to market without these people, supporting the work that you're doing. And yesterday, when we were running a webinar with Strategizer, we asked people which key function is the hardest one to collaborate with. And we sort of listed a whole bunch of key functions. And the one that was voted as the most difficult to collaborate with was legal and compliance, right? Because, they're like, risk averse. They're trying to stop you from burning the company or hurting the company brand. But what's interesting is that, like, our colleagues at Bayer, right, when they were running the Catalyst Fund, they spent a lot of time creating alignment with legal and compliance. Because what they realized was every single one of the innovation teams that were coaching in the innovation program always had to go to legal and compliance and negotiate everything anew. It was as if everything was just happening for the first time, every time. So they thought, why don't we get together with legal and compliance and design a process that's aligned to our innovation process so that teams don't have to go and negotiate anew, right? And I've run similar workshops, like when I was working with AirPlus, where we bring the legal team into the room, right? And we put our innovation process on the wall, and we have a conversation about when do what legal principles apply? What do we need to do from a legal and compliance perspective during discovery? What do we need to do during validation? What do we need to do when we're ready to actually scale? And so in that conversation, you can really start to create alignment. And then the legal and compliance team creates this sort of like almost guide for innovation teams to use as they're doing their work. So with the Bayer Catalyst Fund, they were able to actually create this sort of guidance, and that actually helped the team speed up because they didn't have to keep going to legal and compliance every time they were working on an idea. And so creating this alignment is really, really important. And so you can see, right, these two dimensions that I'm talking about are the two dimensions, to my mind, that make for an authentic intrapreneur. To have an impact, you need intrapreneurs that really understand that they have two jobs for the intrapreneur. The first job is to lose the act, like I said before. So your first job is to lose the act, and you lose the act and you replace that by value creation. So that's the first dimension. The second dimension is you go out as you do your work and you lose the ego, right? And when you lose the ego, you replace that by creating a collaborative culture within your organization where innovation collaborates with co-functions and build a bridge to the core. And this culture change allows you to be able to do the value creation aspects in a more repeatable way, right? Because you're removing the barriers and increasing the enablers for innovation as a repeatable process. And these are the two things that intrapreneurs should actually be focused on. Now, what's interesting is that as innovation has become really popular, inside organizations, it's a buzzword, everyone's talking about it, and people are thinking about how to do that kind of work. A lot of innovation programs have been getting started, right? But people who are starting these innovation programs are not really thinking about what is this innovation program for? Is it value creation or is it culture change? So you might see some people who will open an innovation lab. This is within the same company, by the way, right? They might open one team will open an innovation lab. Another team will open a skills and learning program. Then another team will start some corporate venture capital. Everybody wants their piece of the pie. And then somebody else will go to Silicon Valley and open an innovation outpost. And before you know it, you've got little fires everywhere. An R&D lab, an intrapreneurship program, a center for excellence, dedicated innovation boards. And these things are uncoordinated, right? Nobody's really thinking about how all these things come together. So when we work with organizations, we actually sit down with them and say, let's review the work that you're doing. Let's take all the programs that you're running and evaluate the impact that they're actually having on your organization. So we take these little fires everywhere and we try and sort of create a map. We try and create a map against these two dimensions that I was talking about, right? So we're not just talking about, authenticity, value creation, and culture change in a feeling way. We also wanted to influence the way we design our innovation program. So after we've done the analysis, right, we can say, okay, you opened an innovation outpost in Silicon Valley, but it's not really creating value, and because it's so far away, it's not really impacting the organization in terms of culture change. Now, we don't do this so that we make fun of innovation outposts, right? We do this so we can lead a conversation with the organization of saying, okay, how can we improve these programs so that they can start to create value? Where do you really want, your R&D sort of function to sort of start adding value by maybe working on business models, right? And then that allows it to move up the value creation chain. So these are conversations we have with teams or we have with leaders so they can think about the programs they're running and how they can use those to really drive value within their organizations. And that's what we really care about, and that's what matters. And also, the final poll that I'm going to put out today, and sort of you can help me, and this is for the audience again. When you think about the innovation programs that you're currently running, all the innovation programs that are running within your company, what impact are they having? Are they value creation? Is it culture change? Are they doing both? Are they doing neither? Right? It's just interesting to see what people think about that and whether they've ever used that evaluation lens to review some of their innovation programs.
Yeah, so the poll is live, and people can submit votes.
Mm-hmm.
And as we do have a lag, we're waiting a bit to get the results. I see the first votes coming in. Mm-hmm. So far, it's even, 25, 25, 25. Now we're getting more votes. Mm-hmm. A slight lead for both.
Cool. Are there any votes for neither?
Yes, 17% so far.
Right. That's always a surprising one for me.
That it's so low or that it's so high?
No, that there's anything like that at all.
Yeah.
Right? That's an option that anybody can choose, and they can really get a sense that that's what's happening with the innovation programs we're running, right? And then the question just becomes, what do you do with those programs that are doing neither? How do you improve them and get them to be better?
Yeah,
okay, so you can close the poll, Saurabh. What is the final result?
We have 35% for both, 28 for culture change, 25 for value creation, and 12 for neither.
Okay, cool. No. Thank you very much for that. And so I'm just going to wrap up by saying that it's really hard to scale intrapreneurship inside large organizations. It's a big mountain to climb. There's a lot of barriers and a lot of resistance because you're trying to create an exploration machine in an organization that's designed to execute and exploit current success. And so you're constantly bumping up against these barriers. And so because you know that you're going to be bumping up against these barriers, you don't want as an entrepreneur to start creating your own barriers by how you conduct yourself. You start conducting yourself with innovation theater, you start conducting yourself as if you're Elon Musk, and now you're adding barriers to barriers that already exist. So what I would encourage all entrepreneurs or all innovators working inside large organizations to really think about is you are an entrepreneur in one sense, but you're also not an entrepreneur in another sense, right? You're an innovator working inside the large organization. And some of the behaviors, the egotistical, move fast, break things, all of that stuff that happens in the entrepreneurship space is actually counterproductive if you take those behaviors and apply them inside a large organization. You're basically hurting yourself, shooting yourself in the foot. It's hard enough to be an innovator without, creating a whole group of people that are actively rooting for you to fail just because of the way you conduct yourself. And so I'll leave you with that thought. And if you want to learn more about, my work, you can check out my new book, Pirates in the Navy, now available on Amazon. And it's over to you, Saurabh, and questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Tendayi. If you don't mind, unshare your slides so that people can see the two of us larger, and whenever you want to show another slide, you can pull it up again. So we're getting the first questions in, and I invite everyone who has questions based on Tendayi's presentation to write them in the chat. I will start, and I will go through them in the order. So the first one, that's an easy one, I think, for you to answer, came from Nixa, and he was asking, you mentioned that legal and compliance was the hardest to work with. What was the second one? And his guess was HR. I have another guess, which is finance, but let's see what you say.
Yeah, no, HR wasn't the second one. It was, some people were like, why didn't you put IT in there, right? IT is also one that people were complaining about it, right? And then there's also finance. So you're right about finance. Finance is also one because they won't let you do anything without writing that 35-page business case, right? So
which is wrong anyway. Which turns out to be wrong anyway.
Yeah, so that's another group that we often have to work with, and they create difficulty. But legal and compliance is the one people always complain about the most.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let's go to the next question from Peter, and he's asking. So Peter is one of those people. I think he has been at all 4 Agile 100 conferences. Thank you, Peter. And now to his questions. If in 2/3 of the organization it is so easy to disband innovation teams, what is the common denominator? And he follows up with another question: is what is the thing they are doing wrong most often?
Yeah, so I mean, you find those two things that I just sort of put together, right? This act plus this sort of egotistical, or maybe sometimes it's not even egotistical, right? Sometimes it's fear. So they don't really want to collaborate with the core business. I mean, it is possible, right, to run a guerrilla movement inside an organization where you're constantly ducking and hiding your innovation projects and then figuring out a way to make them successful. But I think it's better to build relationships, right, to try and embed yourself inside the organization. So the question becomes, what's the best way to embed yourself? I find that entrepreneurs sometimes celebrate success too early, right? Have you ever seen that, Saurabh, right, where they work on they're given permission to work on something, and that thing becomes successful, and then they're like, yeah, we got it made, right? But it's a one-off project, and then you become like the famous intrapreneur inside your company. They're now like wheeling you off to judge hackathons and speak to the media, and before you know it, you've forgotten that you're still part of this machinery that is not designed to support innovation. So the number one mistake we're making is that we're not really focusing our energies on changing or transforming the companies that we're working with and influencing and, creating enablers that can support the innovators that are coming in from behind us. How do other people sort of, how are we making the road easier for them as they come up?
Yeah. But I mean, you mentioned this celebrating success too early. This reminds me a lot of entrepreneurs, like real entrepreneurs as well, because you have so many startups, they get funding and they celebrate, but they haven't actually achieved anything yet,
exactly.
Right? They've convinced 1 or 2 or 3 investors, but they haven't delivered value. They haven't seen product market fit. They haven't generated any revenue. So they don't have any sustainable business model out there, but they're still celebrating, and they tend to lose that focus. So maybe there are some similarities between intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs out there.
Exactly. Right? And that funding is not the same thing as a successful startup. And we've been
Absolutely.
a one-off success is not the same thing as an innovation ecosystem, right? So that's what we really need to be thinking about.
Yeah, cool. So let's go to the next question from Petra. She's asking, what is your experience with having a separate innovation part of the company versus trying to get innovation embedded in the normal value creation part of the organization? When to choose which option? That's an excellent question.
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. And unfortunately, the answer is always unsatisfying, which is it depends.
It depends.
and so I think what really matters is that it depends on the type of innovation that you're working on. So efficiency innovation, where you're just optimizing an existing business, or sustaining innovation where you're taking current capabilities and applying them maybe to new markets. That's the kind of stuff that could probably survive really well inside the exploit machine. But once you start going to like crazy transformative innovation where you're creating new business models and going to new markets, you need some level of separation. The separation need not be physical. It could just be in management styles, right? You can say separate teams, maybe separate leaders, maybe separate KPIs, separate processes, or it could be physical. It could be an innovation lab that sits, across the street from the main building, whatever it is. But here's the qualifier. Regardless of whether or not you have an innovation lab that's far away or you have a separate management process, it is absolutely critical that you're consistently managing stakeholders. Because even the innovation that's happening far away, there's going to be somebody who's important who's going to have to make a decision about what happens with it. I often hear, heads of innovation going, I don't need to build a relationship with the main organization. When my stuff succeeds, I'll just spin it out of the company. And I'm just like, are you crazy? Do you know how many people from legal and compliance will turn up when you start talking about making a spin out, right? Like they'll show up and go, corporate finance rules say blah, 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 because, so there's no chance that you can ever avoid the mothership. So you might as well just hug it and build a relationship with it, because yeah,
that's very interesting. So, following up on that question, and this is one of the questions that I noted down for myself, is what is like the profile of an ideal intrapreneur that you see? Like, from which departments do they come? What kind of work experience do they have? Are they hired from the outside? What have you seen out there? And do you see any patterns of success?
Yeah, so the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur are not really connected to divisions or departments. I've seen them come from everywhere, right, within the organization. The characteristics of an entrepreneur are two things that are in contradiction. And an entrepreneur is a contradiction of like personality concepts, right? On the one part, they're adventurous, explorative, and curious, all the things that an entrepreneur is, wanting to have an impact on the world, make a dent on the world, etc., right? And then they've got this other thing, which is a big part of their personality, which is their temperament, right? They can deal with rejection and navigating politics and jumping over obstacles and working with leadership. They have the humility to do that. So this combination of humility plus being adventurous, like that's rare. People who are like adventurous are often also very big ego, right? And so
impatient,
and impatient as well. And so that's the big. So there's a quote that I really like from this book by Kyan Krippendorf, where he's talking to one of the guys that was heading Nike's innovation lab, and the guy says, inside a large organization, you spend a lot of time making sure that the cannons align. Like there's a lot of like cannons aligning. Like you have to do that. But unlike a startup, right? Once the cannons align and you let off the shot, like the explosion is big. So you have a much bigger impact once you align the cannons. But the time to align the cannons is really what an entrepreneur needs to have the patience to do.
Okay. Okay. So no patterns in terms of departments or work experience, much more in terms of the characteristics that you just mentioned. That's good to
Exactly.
know. So let's go to the next question from the audience, which is from Shahadij, and he's asking, or she, which is difference between two types of entrepreneurs, creators versus implementers? Maybe a good follow-up to the question that I just asked.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that she's saying they're creative people, right? And then people that go out there and then sort of execute. And so I like that question, but I think the way I'd answer that question is think about it more as from a team perspective, which is, what are the various skill sets you need in an innovation team? And then you can have people that are really creative. You can have people that are kind of, stop, let's implement, let's really think about how we execute this idea, people that are experimental and testing, and that sort of cross-functional mix of personality types. Because when we talk about cross-functional teams, we often talk about them in terms of like departments, like bring legal, bring this, bring that. But actually, if you have people from legal and people from, and they're all got the same personality type or same style of working, you don't really have a cross-functional team. And so you really want to mix these sort of psychological profiles together, and then maybe you'll have a really great team right there.
Okay. Now, when we think about those teams, have you seen, like, how do most of those teams work, especially the successful ones? Are they still bound to work in the same way that the traditional organization works, like in the exploit dimension? Or are they given some leeway to work in a different way as they're doing more of the explore work?
Yeah, no. So for innovation to succeed, you cannot use exploit practices to drive innovation, right? Innovation teams need to be able to use agile methodologies, design thinking, testing, experimentation, iteration, searching until they find something that works. So we're not saying to innovation teams, change the way you work to align to exploits. That's not what we're saying. And that's really important. What we're saying is work within your organization to make the way that innovators work a legitimate part of how the company does business. Mm-hmm. We want our organization to embrace these methodologies, embrace this style of man. So, for example, one of the things we know is that you cannot make big financial bets on innovation ideas. You have to make small bets that increase over time, and only on those teams that are showing traction. Now, you can't do this on your own. It is the finance guys that have to go, okay, we're going to make small bets, and these small bets don't need a 35-page business case. But once you get to a certain level of investment, maybe then you bring the business case. So now you're aligning your methodologies and how you like to work, or the things we know are world-class innovation practices, with how the organization is also designed from an org design leadership standpoint. And so that's really what we're talking about here. We're not saying stop experimenting and start executing just because, right? We're saying we need both sides having equal levels of legitimacy within the organization.
Yeah. So a lot of the changes that you're referring to are changes either to the structure, like how teams are set up, being cross-functional versus silos, are changes to policies. Instead of having the 35-page business plan, you can do something shorter, maybe like a business model canvas. And then there are also changes to metrics, right? You would have different metrics to measure the success of something new compared to an established business model. Yeah. From my experience, this heavily involves leaders. Yes. Now, how do you get the leaders to buy into this? Because I think even if you're the head of the innovation department, there are other people you need to get on board to drive these changes forward.
Yeah, so that's a fascinating one. Alex Osterwalder likes to say a lot of heads of innovation are reporting to the chief digital officer, who's reporting to the CTO, who's reporting to the CEO. So they've never spoken to the CEO in their entire time as head of innovation, right? And so the question becomes, how do you influence leaders? And we really want to build that legitimacy and influence towards leaders. And so there's two parts, right? You could be lucky enough to work in an organization where your CEO is the one that's driving the change. So and that's pretty cool, because then you've got a lot of wind on your back. But when we were working at Pearson, we really focused on getting leadership support. So we were working with teams and coaching them for sure, but like 50% of our time was like meeting with leaders, meeting with the CFO, meeting with the CTO, presenting to the board, so that we could get our framework approved as the official framework for the organization. The thing that makes it easier is if the teams you're coaching get an early win. Now you can take that to the leadership and go, look, like this process can really create value for your organization. We saved you X amount of money, or we solved this problem that this product had because they didn't understand customer value. We helped them figure that out. And now look at the revenue they're generating. And now what we're asking for you is to give us permission to scale some of these methodologies so you can apply them to more projects. And now you can start to build that relationship with the organization that way, with the leadership at least. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned this chain of command, right? From the CEO to the head of innovation, usually being like 3 or 4 layers.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
in his latest book, Alex and the team at Strategizer, The Invincible Company, they talk about the role of a chief entrepreneur.
Yes.
Would that be your ideal head of innovation, who is like maybe more or less a sparring partner to the CEO?
That's the ideal situation. It's either the CEO themselves or the chief entrepreneur, or they appoint, a colleague with sort of equal, maybe not absolutely equal, but a high level of power at least. Because what we have inside, like I was once running an innovation workshop, and the head of innovation was telling me that the people that work for him get approached by their colleagues at work, and the colleagues are asking them, why do you work for that guy? Like, why would you ruin your career by working for that guy? Right? And so like, how do we change that, right? And so we really need to give innovation legitimacy within not only should it be on the org chart, but it should be on the org chart high enough so that people can really see that it has status within the organization.
Yeah. Cool. So as a final question, as I want this to be as practical as possible, do you have any examples of companies who have done this in a great way? There are tons of case studies in the Invincible Company, but maybe you can share 1 or 2 with the audience today.
Yeah. So when you say done this in a great way, do you mean like already completed the implementation, or?
No, but where you see a lot of the patterns that you talked about being implemented in a successful way, and they're achieving the successes.
Right. So that's interesting, right? I mean, we're working right now, Strategize a lot with a lot of large pharmaceutical companies, which I cannot name. But inside those organizations, then people think like pharma is really highly regulated, right? And how can they do innovation in highly regulated environments? But pharma companies are really starting to think about how they can move beyond the selling of medicine to start monetizing some of the digital solutions that are out there, right? With net new business models. And they're suddenly realizing that they're good at R&D, but they're not that great at business R&D. And so our collaborations with them, like for one of the largest ones that we're working with right now, we've implemented about 4 or 5 accelerator programs. So we're really focused on creating value. And our goal with the accelerator program is to launch 5 or 6 new business models ideas out into the world. We want an early win, and we've set our target for the early win to be end of 2021. We want to get an early win by then. And then while we're doing that, we've been setting up innovation boards and also really building up, the capability within the organization. This week, I was running a train the trainer program to build a really large group of coaches within that organization that can start to coach the innovation teams that we're building. This morning, I had a conversation with the head of HR in the organization to start train. They've got these training programs where they're training emerging leaders. We're going to run their project is going to be an accelerator program that they're going to have to run as part of their HR training. So we're kind of permeating all these various pieces, and we're hoping at least by end of 2021, we've hit some sort of level of like embeddedness within the organization, which is different from a lot of innovation consultancies, by the way, Saurabh, right? A lot of innovation consultancies are happy to get the coaching and the workshop, but then they don't engage with the rest of the organization, right? They do the 3 months coaching. They don't know what happened to the teams they coached after they left. Yeah. So that's really, really like a different approach to what we're doing right now. So really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
By the way, before I go, special shout out Holger Niels Paul, who did all the visuals for the book Pirates in the Navy. I just wanted to send a special shout out to my boy Holger.
Yeah, and Holger will be speaking not right next and right after you, but one after that. So everyone will get to see some more nice visuals from Holger as well. Tendayi, thank you so much for taking the time, pulling up this presentation and sharing your insights today with us. I will reach out to you for another interview at some point. It was a pleasure to host you, and I'll see you someday soon.
All right. Thank you, Saurabh.